In this video, we're going to be discussing sodium hydroxide relaxers. We start with sodium hydroxide. Up on the board I have the NaOH, which is the formula for sodium hydroxide, KOH, potassium hydroxide, CaOH, calcium hydroxide, and NH4OH, which is ammonium hydroxide. All four of these chemicals are caustic. They're all four used to straighten the hair in certain instances. And because they're caustic, they have the ability to burn. That's what the word caustic means, State Board information. Acids neutralize alkalis. So a State Board question, and they are going to ask you questions when you're using your chemicals, what proper first aid is. Excuse me. Proper first aid for an alkaline burn is to rinse it off and apply an acid. Proper first aid for an acid burn is to rinse it off and apply an alkali. But your questions aren't going to be that simple. They're going to ask you a specific. During a sodium hydroxide relaxer, your client is experiencing burning. What is proper first aid? So now they expect you to know that your sodium hydroxide relaxer is on the alkaline side of the street. So proper first aid is to rinse it off and apply an acid. If I'm an esthetician, I'm doing disencrustation. Or let me reverse that. And we're doing a chemical exfoliant, which is an acid burn. Proper first aid is to rinse it off and apply an alkali. And they're going to give you situations to see if you know which side of the pH scale your products are on. It's very important. Also remember that it's A plus B equals C. A is my client's hair and the chemical structure of that hair. B is what's in the bottle. And A plus B equals C. So A is my ability to analyze the structure of the hair and know whether it's fine, medium, or coarse, to know if I need mild, regular, or super. And it's my job to know what's going on inside that hair shaft while the chemical that I'm applying is on it. If I don't know what's happening, how do I know when it's done? How do I know how to fix an over-processed relaxer, which, by the way, remember my statements, you can never unfry chicken. Once the hair structure is damaged, you can't fix it, but you can use conditioning agents and products to help keep it on her head, and that's a major goal. We want to keep it on her head. Up here on the board, I have NaOH versus CaOH, which means that sodium hydroxide versus calcium hydroxide, which means it's lye versus no-lye. So now we're going to discuss the lye in no-lye, because we're now going to take a look at the inside structure of the hair. And if you go back to the video on hair structure, you're going to remember or review that the sulfur atom that's on the end of each of those peptide chains is called cysteine. That's the soft form of sulfur, gives my hair its elasticity. The ones going across this way is the hard form of sulfur called cysteine. That's what gives my hair its strength. And that's what determines the strength of the product I'm going to choose to use. You can't see in the hair shaft. You don't know that. But we do know the smaller the hair shaft, the less polypeptide chains I'm going to have. The larger or coarser the hair, the more peptide chains I'm going to have. So it stands to reason fine hair would use a mild, normal hair would use the medium, okay, and the coarse hair might need the super. Now I do have to take into consideration porosity, which if she's done a lot of thermal work, the hair may be very porous and I need to may drop down to a mild. That's what a strand test is for. A strand test is going to tell you the strength of the solution you need to use and how long it's going to take so that you don't over-process hair. Now let's look at the chemical reaction that this is called. This is referred to as lanthionization. In chemistry, the word thio, T-H-I-O, means sulfur. So we're dealing with the sulfur content. My S bonds, the S stands for sulfur. So there's a direct impact on the sulfur atoms in my hair shaft. So just what is that impact? Well, sodium hydroxide removes one negative sulfur ion from the hair shaft, while calcium hydroxide removes two negative ions from the hair shaft. So in a lye relaxer, it's actually twice as damaging, and that's the lie in no-lye. So why did they do that? Well, because when we were doing sodium hydroxide relaxers, maybe the hairdressers weren't getting all of it shampooed out thoroughly. So how do I know that all the relaxer's out of my hair? When you're rinsing the relaxer out of the hair, you're going to see foam and bubbles in the sink. Do you know why? Because remember, that's the main ingredient in shampoo. As soon as that water runs clear and you see no more foamy bubbles, you know the relaxer's out. But always get this area behind the ear in the nape area, because that's the one where it gets left. Then my client is going to have hair breakage in her nape area, and yeah, we can cover it up, but that's not the idea. The idea is to make sure you get all of the product out. You can also take your finger and run it around the scalp area under here. If it feels a little bit slimy, it's not out. Take your hose, re-rinse, and if you see the bubbles, yes, you'll know that it's not completely out. So one of the main causes of hair damage is the residual relaxer that's been left in the hair, and the other's not getting it out completely. So on the state board, they're going to ask you the chemical reaction. You need to remember it's lanthionization. Now the other things that we use our sodium hydroxide for, number one, of course, is your relaxers. So it's maximum 10%. You're not going to have a pH above 12. Then why does the book say 14? Because they're talking about pure sodium hydroxide. And yeah, it does have a pH of 14. But we're not putting pure sodium hydroxide on the hair. In this humongous tub, there's only 10%. Okay? Now, this is the relaxer that I use on my daughter's hair. And I remember our pH papers. I'm telling you, take your pH test. We need to know what the pH of our product is. Here's your legend, and here's the paper that I put in. Okay, so when I'm looking at it, I'm looking at a pH of 11. That's pretty strong, but she also has very coarse hair, so we need that extra power for that. When we're looking at a base surfactant, do you remember the lecture on shampoos and conditioners? Okay, in shampoos, a base surfactant is sodium hydroxide, the main one, and sulfuric acid. When sodium hydroxide and sulfuric acid come together, they create sodium lauryl sulfate, which is a negatively charged surfactant. The other alkali they use is ammonia. So when you're looking at your ingredients and you see ammonium lauryl sulfate, that's not the choice to use on relaxed hair, because ammonia-based products over sodium hydroxide relaxed hair don't do well. Okay? I'm not going to be doing her a service. For instance, now that you're in beauty college, what shampoo and conditioner do you recommend? And you go, I don't know, I haven't had that class yet. Okay, so as we go through each of the chemicals that we use, I'm going to reiterate what shampoos you should use. So a sulfate-free is also has a base surfactant of sodium, but the sulfite is a little bit modified, a little bit differently, and that's okay to use, but not an ammonia-based shampoo. It's in cuticle softeners, cuticle remover, 3 to 5%. It's in depilatories. This is the chemical hair removal, the alternative to shaving or waxing. The disencrustation lotion that estheticians use to prepare the skin for extractions cannot have a pH that exceeds 10. The moisturizers, it's in moisturizers, okay, for the skin as a pH adjuster. It's also the main ingredient in a moisturizer that comes after a a chemical exfoliant. I had a teacher say to me, Sue, you need to try this moisturizer. It's really good. So I turned it on. I read the ingredients, and it had sodium hydroxide, and it was right in the middle. It wasn't at the end. It was in the middle, and I'm looking at that going, well, that doesn't offend me. So I tried it, and the first day I used it, it was wonderful. Okay. The second day I used it, it was okay. The third day I used it, I'm going, I'm not sure I like this. The fourth day I used it, I knew I didn't like it. Then I read the directions. Duh. What are you supposed to do when you... Okay, I was brought up by the father that said, you know, instructions are for people who don't have a brain and can't figure it out on their own. Well, they're really not, especially in our industry. You need to read the instructions. And this said for use in the first 3 days after a chemical exfoliant. Remember, alkalize, neutralize acids. So when you're having a chemical exfoliant on the skin, you have acid. It's very acidic. So the pH of your skin went from 5 down to maybe 2 or 3. And it's not going to come up all by itself. So my moisturizer that she gave me, because my skin is really dry. I have a pH of about 4. I have dry skin. So the first time I used it, it was great. It hydrated me beautifully. It brought my pH to 5 like it's supposed to. The second time that I used it, I was probably already at my normal 4, so it was okay, but I didn't see any major benefit. The third time I used it, it took me too high. So now my skin is dry, flaky, peely, and I'm not liking it. That's when I read the instructions. So remembering that in moisturizers, in a normal moisturizer, it's just there as a pH adjuster. And once again, I should be taking my pH papers and I should be testing the pH of my moisturizer. When we make hyaluronic acid ourselves in the classroom, it has a pH of 6, okay, which is great for me because I'm 4, it's going to bring me up. Oily skinned client already is at 6, it's not going to harm her, but we need to reduce the pH. She needs a toner after that has a pH of 3 or 4 to bring the pH of her skin down to 5 after you've moisturized. The structure repair. Now let's say a client came to you and she had a relaxer at another facility and she said, I'm getting breakage and my hair is dry and brittle, and I've been using conditioners, you know, and I've been using protein packs. So what's wrong? Well, the first problem is I can use no cream rinse on the hair. I can use no traditional conditioners because the main ingredient is ammonia. When you see steraclonium chloride, polyquaternum, any of the IUM words in a cream rinse or a traditional conditioner, they're made to soften the hair. And remember, it's an alkali that softens and swells. So what you're doing is you're still leaving the hair at too high a pH, and the product in there is actually more harmful than it is beneficial. I need to be using a protein hair conditioner and protein reconstructors. When you see the word protein pack, usually the number 2 or 3 ingredient says steraclonium chloride or some type of clonium chloride or polyquaternum, which is ammonia. They may have some protein in there. You may see the word keratin. You may see other proteins. But if the word hydrolyzed doesn't precede that, it's of no benefit. A true protein reconstructor is going to have as a main ingredient hydrolyzed keratin. The word hydrolyzed means that it has been chemically reconstructed. The hair doesn't have a stomach. If you just put protein or keratin on the hair, it can't utilize it. It has to be hydrolyzed. The chemist has to have broken it down into the smaller molecules so that it can actually penetrate the hair shaft and do what it needs to be done. So I'm going to use a protein reconstructor. I'm going to make sure there's nothing in it. Now, Infusion 23 is going to take the place of a, quote, cream rinse. When we shampoo our hair, bleached hair, because it's drier and it can be hard to comb, okay, you want that tendency to reach for a cream rinse, which in my case it's okay because my structure damage isn't the loss of a sulfur atom. And when we talk about bleached hair, we'll go into the types of conditioner that hair needs. But right now we're talking about relaxed hair that has lost its sulfur. And the difference between these two hairs, my hair, bleached, and relaxed hair, is the difference between a house that's had a fire and a house that's had a flood. The structure damage isn't the same. When you have burned wood, it actually has eaten out and it has weakened the infrastructure of that beam. And that's what happens in the hair shaft. Because it's removing the negative sulfur atoms all through the hair, it has compromised the infrastructure of the hair shaft. I need to strengthen it. I need to rebuild it. And the only way to do that is with protein reconstructors. Infusion 23 is a B vitamin. It's in the classification of instant conditioners. And you can just spritz it on the hair, or it's easiest because it's a liquid, it runs all over the place. But if you put it in a spray bottle and you spritz it, then you can comb the hair. It removes all the tangles, but it has no ammonia in it. So it's excellent for sodium hydroxide relaxed hair. Also, you can't put a chemical on hair that has no elasticity. It doesn't work. If my hair and my end bonds don't have that elasticity, then when I put a chemical on, I am more prone to breakage than I am with elasticity. So normally, and that's a question on the state board, okay, your client comes in for a chemical service and there's no elasticity. What do you do? And the answer is to apply a hair conditioner reconstructor and then do the chemical. Now we have a problem because with sodium hydroxide relaxed hair, I can't shampoo. This is the one chemical that the client needs all of the oils on her scalp that she can get. And in some cases, you may have to add scalp protection because this chemical is so caustic, it could burn her scalp. So that's not an option. But if I missed infusion 23 on it, it'll restore elasticity. How do I know she doesn't have elasticity? Because she's probably done flat iron. And thermal heat removes the elasticity in the hair shaft. So before I apply bleach to my hair, I shampoo it. Before I apply tent or any other chemicals to my clients, I always pre-cleanse. Now, you're going to get some flack on this, all right? But there's not a teacher around who doesn't teach you to shampoo before a permanent wave. And they give you the proper instructions. You go through the hair very gently, like you were washing or shampooing a bald-headed baby's shampoo. You don't take a baby and scrub their little heads, okay? You just gently, very gently, because the purpose is just to remove all the positive ions that are on the hair shaft. Most of my products are positive. Bleach is the exception, but we'll talk about that individually. So I need to be sure that my client's hair has elasticity. And so with relaxed hair that has probably been flat ironed, then I'm going to mist the hair with infusion 23 before I apply my relaxer to restore that elasticity so I don't get any breakage. So now to recap, okay, sodium hydroxide is lye, calcium hydroxide is no-lye. Sodium hydroxide removes one sulfur atom, no-lye removes two, that's the lye and no-lye. The chemical reaction, which will be on your state board exam, is lanthionization, which means the ionization of the thio, or the sulfur in the hair. That's literally what the word means. Ionized, I-O-N, ionized. Thio, okay, lanthionization. And I'm altering the structure, the sulfur atoms. So these are the things that we use that are chemicals that have sodium hydroxide in them. And then this is how to take care of the hair afterward. Now, Sebastian has some really good product. They have a cream that I put in my hair, and then they have texture, which gives it body, and they all have heat protectors in them, and these protect the hair from the heat. So I'm going to shampoo out my relaxer with a neutralizing shampoo, okay? And we didn't discuss this, but we need to. My sodium hydroxide relaxer, we noticed, has a pH of 11. I took the hair from 5 to 11. How do I get it back to a 5? Okay, I can rinse it with water. Water has a pH of about 7. So I might bring it down to a 9 if I'm lucky. Then my neutralizing shampoo should have a pH of 3 or 4. And I'm going to shampoo it 2 or 3 times to make sure I get all the residue out. And then to ensure the acidity of the hair, I'm going to follow with an acid rinse. A lot of companies provide an acid rinse, but if they don't, you can make a quick one with vinegar, which doesn't smell very good. Lemon juice is a little bit better, but remember that I need to test when I'm making it. I need to test my pH. I don't want it to have a lower pH than 3, because then I'm going to have it too strong an acid, and acids harden and shrink, and that's liable to give me some more breakage. So I need to be very careful about that. But the purpose of the acid rinse is to close and seal the cuticle. It's very important. And my protein reconstructors. No ammonia-based products for shampooing and conditioning.